This episode of Where Did the Road Go is brought to you in part by our Patreons. If you want to become a patron, go to wheredidtheroadgo.com. And now our show.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Soraya.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go, where apparently we just keep adding more people to current roundtables to see at what point it becomes chaos. Tonight with us, we have again Mr. Aaron David.
Hello.
We have again Mr. Red Pill Junkie.
Hey, good evening.
And Joshua Cutchin returning after a short absence.
Too many cooks.
And Ren Collier, who we haven't talked to in a while.
Yeah.
I hate that guy.
Is it because he's pretty?
Yeah, it's because he's pretty and his good ideas that I wish I had. So,
Don't count yourself out too much.
We're going to cover some more of these 50 psychological and psychiatric terms to avoid, a list of inaccurate, misleading, misused, ambiguous, and logically confused words and phrases. From part one, I'm sure people could see that there's a lot here that's relevant to the field of the paranormal and consciousness. The next few we're kind of going to skip over because they're not, and that's operational definition. I'm putting a link to this in the show notes, so if anyone wants to go through and read this in full, they are more than welcome to. Number 22 is P equals 0.000.
Did you mention Miguel?
Did I mention Miguel?
I don't think you did.
Yeah, no, I did. I said I mentioned Miguel. I totally mentioned Miguel. He was the second one.
Oh, I thought it was somebody. I felt like there was somebody that was missing. Sorry.
I did mention you, right, Miguel?
I actually don't remember.
Oh,
You did. I remember you did.
Okay.
Okay. Well, anyway, Red Pill Junkie's here too.
Okay.
Because I mentioned Aaron and Red Pill first because they were on the first part of this.
Yeah, sorry. It's been sort of a dog pile. So my apologies. Sorry.
Yeah, well, we covered multiple personality disorders, so Miguel and Red Pill Junkie are here.
Right,
So,
exactly.
feel like sort of Gollum Smeagol thing. Yeah.
So number 23 is a pretty simple one, psychiatric control group. And I think this goes for any real control group. This phrase and similar phrases, i.e. normal control group, psychopathological control group, connote erroneously that a group of essentially normal individuals or mixed psychiatric patients who are being compared with B, groups of individuals with a disorder of interest, schizophrenia or major depression, are true control groups, but they're not. They are comparison groups, and they should be referred to accordingly. The phrase control group in this context may leave readers with the unwanted impression that the design of the study is experimental when it's actually quasi-experimental. Just as important, this term may imply that the only difference between two groups of patients with anxiety disorder and a group of essentially normal individuals is the presence or absence of the disorder of interest. In fact, these two groups most surely differ on any number of nuanced variables such as personality traits, co-occurring disorders, family background, rendering the interpretation of the group differences open to multiple interpretations. And I think that's a pretty obvious thing right there.
Yep.
I mean, everyone has their issues, so you can't say these people are 100% normal, and here are the people who have these weirdness to them, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think there's a lot to discuss there, but it makes just a very good point that with people, you can't, control group is not really the right word.
Yeah, but I think it opens up a lot of discussion about subjectivity of experience.
Sure.
In terms of like what we all experience as being sort of, subjective to our individual interpretation, but also like not necessarily entirely. There might be objective stimuli to our subjective experience, I think is sort of what it.
Well, I think post-traumatic stress syndrome is an example of how subjective that is. I mean, it's a term that's been around, 20 years?
At least, yeah, that sounds about right.
And now there's like a lot of research. I heard Paul Stamets talk about it a little bit with the mushroom talk. Even that's being questioned. I mean, what exactly that pertains to, and has it been defined properly? So these pathological psychology problems, to just stick them in groups of
They're all going to be different. Not everyone who has schizophrenia is the same.
And that's also the role of authority, in deciding who is crazy and who isn't. That's almost like that classic Simpsons episode with Homer goes to the psychiatric ward and he gets stamped crazy, in his hand, and he's trying to take it up when he's out. I mean, it becomes sometimes arbitrary. That someone in power gets to say not only who is crazy and who isn't, but even if you think about it, they get to define the allowed version of reality.
It comes down to you haven't conformed to the societal norms, so you're crazy.
Exactly.
All right, so number 24 is reliable and valid. If one earned $1 for every time an author used this sentence, this test is reliable and valid. In the methods section of a paper, one would be a rich person indeed, as the phrase reliable and valid appears in more than 190,000 manuscripts in Google Scholar.
I mean, to me, it strikes something like it's akin to paranormalists using words like alleged, and it seems to be, or it seems to be, which is something that I'm very guilty of. But I think it's
me too.
But that's more. I think that's more accurate.
Well, yeah, I think it's a little bit more flexible and intellectually honest. But like, I can see that like there being sort of a fallback phrase that this seems to be that sort of fallback phrase. Yeah.
Hey, they say there are at least 3 problems with this ubiquitous phrase. First, it implies that a psychological test is either valid or not valid. Much like the testing of a scientific theory, the construct validation process is never complete, in essence reflecting a work in progress. So as a consequence, the test cannot be said to have been conclusively validated or invalidated. Second, the phrase reliable and valid implies that reliability and validity are unitary concepts, and they are not. There are 3 major forms of reliability: test and retest, internal consistency, and inter-rater. Contrary to common belief, these forms of reliability often diverge, sometimes markedly. For example, scores derived from the thematic perception test and a widely used projective technique frequently display high levels of test-retest reliability, but low levels of internal consistency. There are also multiple forms of validity: content, criterion-related, incremental, which similarly do not necessarily coincide. Third, reliability and validity are conditional on the specific examples examined and should not be considered inherent properties of a test. Hence, the notion that a test is reliable and valid independent of the nature of the sample runs counter to contemporary thinking in psychometrics. So basically, there's no such thing as a solid, reliable, and valid thing that can't be questioned. That all this stuff needs to be open to condition, basically.
Yeah, and I mean, in a way, like, I'm sure at some point people thought, transorbital lobotomy was a reliable and valid way to cure someone's depression.
Right.
Exactly.
And when you use that phrase, like reliable and valid, like it says in the article, you're implying some sort of finality there. Like this is like a law of nature. Like there's no way this can be improved upon or re-examined.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not even just in these type of papers, when this stuff gets transcribed down to the more mundane like internet news on science and stuff, they take reliable and valid as proof. That's been proved. This is a fact.
I think it goes to show how probably 90% of people would say that science can give us truth, where if you ask any scientist, they would say science cannot give us truth. It can just build ever more complex models. But I'm thinking the reliability and validity of a lot of these tests going on depend on the funding and what pharmaceutical is on the line.
Yeah, well,
that's where Terence would say that it's just a crude approximation of the universal mystery. You've got to sort of set. It's just a model, really. It's just a model. Yeah.
I missed that.
Number 25 is statistically reliable, and this phrase appears in over 62,000 manuscripts according to Google Scholar. It is typically invoked when referring to statistical significance, although although small in absolute terms, this difference was statistically reliable, and it has a little mathematical formula. And it says, nevertheless, despite what many psychologists believe, statistical significance bears at best a modest conceptual and empirical association with the result's reliability. That is, its replicability and or consistency over time. Indeed, given the low statistical power of most studies in psychology, a reasonable argument could be advanced that most statistical significant results are unlikely to be reliable. The statistical significance of a result should therefore not be confused with its likelihood of replication. And I think when you're dealing with people, that's just going to be what you get.
You know, this one was interesting to me from like a parapsychological standpoint, because you see a lot of people tout, you know, in psi studies that there was a statistically significant like result that's, you know, higher than chance,
Right.
and then take that as proof that some technique works. And it, like this says, just because something's statistically significant doesn't mean that it's reliably done.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it doesn't mean that you can replicate what you did that one time.
Well, it does seem with some of those tests, you know, they'll get that like the Pear Laboratory was doing the thing where the balls drop, and they would have people concentrate on making them go right or left, and they would get replicable results that weren't massively over chance, but enough so to be significant when no one was watching the balls. They'd make that perfect bell curve, you know. And the more you did, the more you saw that bell curve. But if someone was sitting there concentrating on it, the bell curve would be off. So to me, that was significant.
Yeah.
Because they could replicate it again and again.
Yeah, that's what it's talking about. It's just statistical significance doesn't mean anything without replicable ability. Jesus, what a word. Yeah, so it's like, it's just, those two things can both be there, but I think this is warning against conflating the two.
Yes.
You know, just because something is higher than chance doesn't mean you can do it again, or doesn't mean that it's easy to perform again.
Well, and to go off on a completely different but nonetheless entertaining tangent, are any of you familiar with the Spurious Correlations website?
I think so.
It's this I believe it's like TyllerBigen.com or something.
Because it basically demonstrates that correlation is not
exactly like
causation.
Yeah. You can put in two variables that are like, you know, Nicolas Cage movies and like pool drowning deaths, and like a correlation between the two different factors. So it's a very narrow needle to thread in terms of discerning exactly what all this means.
And I guess also speaks about how the scientific game is played nowadays. I mean, among scientists, they talk about how it's a game of publish or perish.
Yeah.
You know, you have to keep publishing papers as much as possible, because if you don't, well, then you don't get quoted in the peer-reviewed magazines, and then you don't get any grants, and then, well, your career is pretty much over. So they have to keep publishing papers and keep doing these experiments, and they are sometimes, I don't want to say they massage the numbers, but maybe they're trying to show only through statistics that they manage to get the slightest or the slimmest of statistical results in favor of whatever hypothesis they try to prove. So they're using that to say, aha, so you see, this was not entirely a waste of time, and therefore please give me more money to keep continuing whatever it is I'm trying to do.
Right. And there's not to say that there is like, I feel like the relationship between causative entities increases the closer you get to the sort of validity of their sort of like subject matter. So obviously, like, Nicolas Cage movies don't have a lot to do with people dying in swimming pools, but like, you know, if Nicolas Cage was cleaning swimming pools, then maybe it would have something a little bit closer in terms of causative nature. So yeah, that's part of, like, I think this is sort of driving at what we're sort of dealing with nowadays, is that we're sort of it's this weird we sort of talked about this post-fact society that wants to embrace certain things as evidence and as proof when they're not that. And I think that it's become even more difficult to discern, sort of as Miguel alluded to, between like things like causation and correlation, and also just like facts and non-facts, you know?
And two, you're talking about people as well. When you're dealing with psychology and stuff, and people are not statistics. And I think that there was a study I read somewhere that said the longer someone studies to be a psychologist, the less effective they are at actually helping people. And I think part of that is because after a certain point, you're probably thinking of everything in abstract. You're not thinking about the people you're helping. You're thinking about all the statistics, all the stuff you've learned. You're not dealing with them as an individual.
Well, it needs to become applied at a certain point, right?
Yeah.
That's the idea. If you can immerse yourself in theory, and you can immerse yourself in sort of, this sort of, as much as I love academia, honestly, this sort of academic bubble, and you can sort of insulate yourself from the reality of the outside world.
Absolutely.
It's a matter of how psychology evolved, from a bunch of theories by the likes of Sigmund Freud and all of those guys, who were, great thinkers, but most of their ideas have been thoroughly debunked by now. And then it was in the 1950s when experimental psychology started to arise, and that's when they were trying to say, okay, let's try to see if all these ideas we've been, yammering about for the last 50 years or so weren't total, crap, So I guess maybe that's where they up their obsession with statistics and reliable and valid methods came from.
Yeah. Number 26 is steep learning curve. And this is simple, but kind of interesting. It says scores of authors use the phrase steep learning curve or sharp learning curve in reference to a skill that is difficult to master. For example, when referring to the difficulty of learning a complex surgical procedure, one author team contended that it requires a steep learning curve. Nevertheless, from the standpoint of learning theory, these and other authors have it backwards, because a steep learning curve, i.e. a curve with a large positive slope, is associated with a skill that is acquired easily and rapidly.
I think they're just being a smartass there. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, like whoever like actually pointed that out, like, golf clap to that person, because it's like it's sort of a prickish thing to sort of point out. But you're right. That's a good point.
So what would the proper kind of curve be to something difficult to learn?
A shallow curve?
Yeah, shallow learning curve.
I got deep curves, baby.
Because you're putting a lot of effort into learning something, that's taking a lot of time. So I think this is the one that Aaron was excited about. Number 27, the scientific method. Was I right, Aaron? Oh, Aaron is muted at the moment. There he is.
Sorry about that. Yeah, this is something. We've been doing science with the scientific method since the 17th century. It's done pretty well for us, right? We've got some cool stuff. But
let me read the entry.
Oh yeah.
Many science textbooks, including those in psychology, present science as a monolithic method. Most often, they describe this method as a hypothetical deductive recipe in which scientists begin with an overreaching theory, deduce hypotheses, predictions from that theory, test these hypotheses, and examine the fit between the data and the theory. If the data are inconsistent with the theory is modified or abandoned. It's a nice story, but it rarely works this way. Although science sometimes operates by straightforward deduction, serendipity, and inductive observations offered in the service of the context of discovery also play crucial roles in science. For this reason, the eminent philosopher of science quipped that, as a rule, I begin my lectures on scientific method by telling my students that the scientific method does not exist.
Bombastic that would be Karl Popper. Yeah.
Yes.
Bombastic Bill, we love you. Please, we know what you're going to say. Just save it for your debate with Soraya.
It's not going to be a debate. We're going to have a conversation.
Conversation with
I'm
Soraya.
hoping to have you on with Bombastic Bill as well, Josh.
But we love you. So
Contrary to what most scientists themselves appear to believe, science is not a method. It is an approach to knowledge. Specifically, it is an approach that strives to better approximate the state of nature by reducing errors and inferences. Alternatively, one can conceptualize science as a toolbox of finely honed tools designed to minimize mistakes, especially confirmation bias, the ubiquitous propensity to seek out and selectively interpret evidence consistent with our hypotheses, and to deny, dismiss, and distort evidence that does not. Not surprisingly, the specific research methods used by psychologists bear scant surface resemblance to those used by chemists, or astrophysicists, or molecular biologists. Nonetheless, all of these methods share an overreaching commitment to reducing errors in inference and thereby arriving at a more accurate understanding of reality. So basically what it's, and the thing is, you hear this especially from like the materialist side of things, that the scientific method is perfect and it is, infallible and so on and so forth. And here are these scientists basically saying it's not quite like that. It doesn't quite work like that. Not only that, but even though it's meant to break confirmation bias, to me, I feel like we're all people. We all have confirmation bias, and it's impossible to completely eliminate it.
I see it as a methodology that's structured to build on previous knowledge and like minimize error, like I was saying. So, and it's all about observation and repeatability and getting ideas and testing those ideas. But it's seems to me that like that's its restrictive nature, and that's why so many guys out there in science, they don't have unique ideas. This is because of this restrictiveness. Like always the guys with the big ideas, they don't want anything to do with them, and it takes like 50 years for that idea to be, oh wait, maybe that was a good idea. So,
well, I think that's also the whole money aspect of it.
Yeah, I think it's restrictive and kills
progress,
creativity, and in thinking, and uniqueness in thinking. And I'm glad to read this, him saying it doesn't exist.
It's actually a bunch of people.
I don't know.
I mean,
I think that I still will defend the power of the scientific method. Yes, it is restrictive. I agree, but and it's, at the same time, there's a reason for its restrictiveness. It's kind of like a cone, or a filter that tries to, weed out the wheat from the chaff. And maybe the restrictiveness comes from the tendency of the human nature for confirmation bias. That maybe if we manage to get rid of that, then the scientific method would not be so rigid in its structure. I guess in a way, the problem with the scientific method today, and let's not forget, guys, that there was a time when the heretics, the revolutionary guys, were the guys who were advocating for the scientific method.
Sure.
I'm talking about the 17th century. I'm talking about the guys who were saying, well, let's test this. Let's test these dogmas. These things that are being defended, or are being said that it's the God-given truth by the church and the king. And there were these maverick guys, natural philosophers, who are now called scientists, who say, well, let's use our God-given reason and experiment on this to see if it's true or not.
Yeah.
And maybe the problem is that the scientific method became too effective, and now it's kind of like, I don't know, the metaphor of the guy who is trying to search for his lost keys, and he is just below a street lamp, and someone says, oh, so you lost the keys around here. Say, no, I actually lost them over there. So why are you looking for them there? No, because here's where the light is. Here's where the power of the scientific method has proven its worth. So it can't go beyond a certain threshold, but because of our fear of it, or of our reliability of it, we're not willing to search for the missing keys where the light of the scientific method doesn't shine.
Well, I also think what they're saying here is that it's not that there's anything wrong with the scientific method. It's just not the only way that we arrive at conclusions in science. There's a lot of other things that come into play, and it's not, it gets sold like it's the scientific method. This is how everything is discovered and how everything works, and this is what everyone uses. And it's like, no, that's not the case at all. There's sometimes where, things just, I mean, how many times do they invent something? And we may have talked about this in the last roundtable about this. They invent, a drug for this disease, but it turns out to help this disease. Well, they didn't get that via the scientific method. They got that just by chance,
Right. And this sort of speaks to something that I don't think a lot of people realize, is that like a lot of our understanding of psychological disorders is completely based upon the accounts of sufferers.
Yes.
There's not, yes, you can possibly see certain brain activity, but in a lot of cases, like you can't see certain brain activity on a scan, but people still suffer certain things that are recognizable across the population. So I think that particular aspect should be extrapolated across, what the scientific method cannot do, cannot accomplish, because there are certain shortfalls there that are purely based on observation rather than observation in a laboratory setting.
I mean, I think the key here is it's structured to build upon previous knowledge. But what do you do? I mean, this is the mantra. The scientific method has been the mantra of materialism. What do you do when it's all falling to pieces? Like the quantum stuff. Look, this makes no sense in light of our previous knowledge.
Well, is it the fault of the scientific method, or is it the fault of the institutions who benefited from it?
I think
there's also a lot of bad data out there. I mean, they've done tests with like peer review process and showed that papers from, bigger universities will get approved even if they're nonsense. And they'll, because they'll literally make a gibberish paper and put it through, but put some big person's name on it, and it'll get approved by the peer review. And they'll take a peer-reviewed paper that got approved, put some small university's name on it, some nobody, put it through, and it'll get rejected. So the peer review process is far from perfect. And that being the case, there's going to be a lot of noise in that machine.
Well, the other thing too is that the way it's talking about the scientific method, of the popular conception of the scientific method, is something that you teach people in like grade school. How would they teach this to a bunch of like sixth graders? That they have to just give them, okay, well, this is the scientific method and it's the way you figure out things and it's the only thing. Like, this is, I think, calling for a more nuanced approach to the way discoveries and science is actually done,
right?
Versus what the kind of the pop culture idea or the grade school idea of what the scientific method is or is capable of doing.
Yeah, I don't want to come out as like anti-science because I think it's great, but I mean, the people who have had given us the biggest breakthroughs, like Einstein, he didn't come to his he was highly imaginative, creative.
Yeah,
Steve Jobs is another guy. We only get these guys every it's not, this isn't how we evolve. It's by very, what's the word I'm looking for?
Well, I think the big ideas
intuition.
What's that?
By intuition instead of,
Yeah, I mean, like LSD and how the internet came about.
I think the big ideas come from the people who are outside of, the mainstream way of doing things, and then the improvements on those ideas are made from within the system.
Yeah, because in the end, Einstein was confirmed. You know, all of these creative and highly imaginative ideas from Einstein were sooner or later confirmed by observation and experimentation. You know, so
Right.
it's difficult to say. It's kind of like a chicken and egg conundrum.
Mhm.
But you
Was
know,
Was it Descartes who had the dream or a vision of an
yes,
angel that told him the
Yes,
universe
yeah.
could be
the
understood?
angel told them that he should make sense of the world with measure and number. to quote Saint Terence. But
That's what I'm trying to get at. That these people who really push us forward are visionaries.
I'm like, you look at the discovery of the benzene molecule, you look at the discovery of the double helix, like all these
Yep.
things have at the very least a psychedelic sort of basis behind their discovery.
Yes.
There are some people
Sure.
who arrived at that through obviously like laboratory controlled scientific methods, but other things have been chance with like a very strong mouthfeel of divine intervention.
Well, the thing too that Miguel brought up about Einstein, one of the useful aspects of the scientific method is the ability to replicate or test things, because you have to be able to apply these things that you have theories for. Otherwise, they just stay good ideas. But by confirming them and replicating them with a method like the scientific method, you're able to actually like implement these ideas and do something with them rather than just write a book about it.
And
Yeah, I believe there in this world there are extraordinary people, gifted people, who are able to intuit, to see the path between A and D, right? But sooner or later, science or the scientific method, the lesser people have to understand that to get from A and D, you have to go to cross from A to B and C. So I guess the scientific method is the one that is supposed to give us the B and C in those paths.
Yep.
So I don't think it works at all, this method of research with paranormal, supernatural,
I was
UFO.
just going to say that. Yeah, I think when you're dealing with the paranormal and the occult and stuff, it's hard to replicate this stuff since we don't, even if we have a theory, like if you say, okay, so aliens are coming here, well, we can't provoke the aliens to come here to verify that that's what's going on.
And that's the thing that I thought that I come back, because there's been a lot of discussion in our circles about Gordon White, but like that's one of the things that I come back to him articulating the most accurately, is that you don't judge a quarterback's performance in the gym. You don't judge the measure of tides in a basin. You don't judge the measure of tides in your sink. Like, these things have to be done in the field, and they're subject to stuff that is not controllable in a laboratory setting.
Well,
Here's the thing, though. I think that you can or should apply the scientific method to parapsychological research and to magic and UFOs and everything else, because I feel like there's no reason you can't. Like, you should.
No, they should, and it can be, and it could be, but they don't, because it doesn't, like, philosophically, rather. I'm sorry, philosophically, it doesn't sort of graft onto that sort of empiricist mindset.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It's
that's the fundamental problem. Yeah,
it's that mindset. Because I mean, like, let's say you do like a ritual or something. You should write down all the factors. You should write down what you did.
And that's what Crowley tried to do.
Yeah, exactly. And that's applying the scientific method. I think people conflate the scientific method with like some kind of materialism or empiricism, but the scientific method can be applied without any sort of isms attached to it.
I don't know. We get Thelema-ism as a result of Crowley's struggle to make magic into something scientific.
But he used the scientific method in the sense that he would do something and then record the results, and then have someone else try it and record the results and see if they got the same results, to see if it was something in his head or if there was something empirical going on.
Maybe the problem is from the fact that fundamentally the scientific method was devised to try to keep people honest, right?
Yeah.
To try to keep researchers to constantly question themselves and think, well, what if I'm wrong? But I guess what Aaron's saying, is that we seem to be getting from all other traditions these ideas that in order to get some kind of effect or some kind of results, well, I'm talking about magical practices, you have to have belief in the result in the first place, which is kind of an anathema to the scientific method. So that is kind of a conundrum with I don't know how it will be resolved in the long run.
Well,
but
that's the thing about magic, Miguel, is that what I've found more than anything is that that's kind of a false belief. They need to believe in it. I mean, just like Grant Morrison said, like the stuff works regardless of whether or not you believe in it.
Well,
it just does.
I think that could be an argument made in both cases. For example, magic works much better in cultures that it's normal.
Believe in them.
Like Australian Aboriginal people in their psychic phone calls. I heard an example given about they just show up at a funeral because they know somebody's died. It's like a 3-day walk. They all know that's totally normal. This was another Gordon White story. But so then you have people like Stephen Skinner, a well-known magician and academic, who's saying you don't need belief at all. Just do it. It's a set of steps you do, and if you do it like you're supposed to, these steps, you get results. So I don't know. Argument can be made both ways.
I don't know, because think about someone like Uri Geller, someone who was tested in the Stanford Research Institute, and the people there were analyzing the results they were getting from him, and they were fantastic, and there was this idea that no one was actually challenging him in a way. They were testing him and they were putting variables in order to try to eliminate, contamination or something like that. But then he goes with to show like Johnny Carson or whatever, and he's in front of skeptics, uber skeptics like James Randi, and then is when he's unable to perform. So a skeptical sees that and say, well, you see, he is faking the data. He's nothing but a charlatan, and he was duping the guys, the scientists at the Stanford Research Institute. But I still leave out the possibility that, well, maybe, when there is this doubt or this kind of like skeptic attitude in front of these phenomena, it kind of like impedes them to manifest.
Or maybe with Geller's case, I mean, the phenomena itself is so unreliable even to people who are specialized in it that, maybe he did produce real results at Stanford, but when forced to kind of be on live TV in front of an audience, not...
I agree that.
He felt the need to cheat, and then just do a stage trick.
Or Soraya setting you up. Here's the softball pitch. Bam, go for it.
I don't know what you're referring to.
Oh, come on. Just because people can fake.
Oh, yeah, sure. Just because someone can fake something doesn't mean they don't have legitimate abilities behind them.
Yeah, exactly.
Forever since I've been listening to Where the Road Go. Come on, man.
I was actually thinking of something else, and now I forgot what it was.
Killing me. So one of the things that I've admired, one of the lines of thinking that I have admired Soraya for, since he won't say it himself, is just because you see a punch faked in a sort of stunt situation or a film or movie, you
find out that a punch is faked in a movie doesn't mean that all punches are faked.
Right.
Yeah.
And you would think if you would want to create the situation with some degree of replication and some degree of control, you would want to sort of like, actually you would want to fake it,
So I would think that potentially we all affect the reality around us. So if you're sitting in a room with a bunch of skeptics, the abilities you have may be affected or limited by that belief, that skepticism, versus a room full of people who are open to the idea that you might have an ability. I mean, we may have a joint reality here somewhere that, these things only manifest in the right situations because everyone affects that reality that we're sharing.
Well,
Well,
it
what if
sounds
it's just
quite-
what if it's just like a home team advantage kind of thing? Where
Yeah.
it's like when you're around people who believe in you, it's easier. There's less pressure. It's just easier for you to accomplish something, or rather than trying to do it in a room full of people who hate your guts and they feel like you're wasting your time. And
I'm going to take
Yeah.
a little bit of a different stance on this. I don't think it has to do with belief or skepticism, but the nature of the phenomena itself. I mean, if you ask somebody who is a shaman or magician or whatever, they would say it's a spirit's doing this.
Right.
If you want to say the phenomena, like going back to Hansen, by nature, it's not going to be stuck into a form. It's chaotic. So it's not going to perform on demand, because then everybody watching Johnny Carson will say, oh, well, we can stick it in this now. And that's, how that works. It's just not going to be, it's anti-institutional by nature. It's just not going to perform like that.
I agree with that, but at the same time, I feel that the attitude of the people will have an influence on the outcome in some manner or form.
I guess an
I'm
example.
thinking, for example, on the Philip experiments, on some of those tests. John Alexander, for example, I think in one of his latest books, he talked about how the military, people in the military were holding spoon bending parties, because they were trying to see, okay, the things that people like Uri Geller were manifesting or were performing, and trying to see, okay, let's see if this is real, and if it's real, let's see if we can weaponize it. So there were a lot of people in those parties who were highly skeptical of these psi abilities, but nevertheless, I guess they were having a good time. They were laughing. They were joking about it, and maybe that is attitude. They were seeing. They looked the other way, and they realized that the spoon had bended. And some people freaked out about it and say, "Oh my God, man, what is this?" So it goes to show that, okay, so maybe in a room of people who are not only skeptical about the outcome, but also annoyed about it, and they are they are angry about it, and thinking of someone else, thinking, oh, if I could be in my house, watching Netflix instead of wasting my time with this nonsense, that could maybe hinder the outcome.
I have a question for Ren. When you did your spirit conjuration, which I think we've heard the story of, did you believe in what you were doing, or were you more skeptical of what you were doing? What was your...
I believed in what I was doing, but the specific spirit that showed up was not the one that I asked for, and I wasn't even particularly trying to summon anything. So it's like it happened even though it wasn't what I was even trying to do.
You went through specific steps to get spirit, and you ended up doing... My spirit conjuration that was... I did not believe. I was just doing it. I'm not sure even why I was doing it. It certainly wasn't to conjure a spirit, but that's what the steps were leading up. That's what they were for. That's what they were designed for. I was sort of doing it for something, another reason for a talisman. So I wasn't expecting this at all. And like you got poltergeist activity. I got poltergeist. I wasn't expecting it. I didn't have faith in that's what was going to happen. It just... huge experience with the spirit happened. And from that point on, I was a believer. But up till that point, I wasn't a believer.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's what Grant Morrison says, when he about his first spirit summoning, he did it because that's what Aleister Crowley and all these people said would happen if you read these words and drew the circle and did the thing. and he thought they were full of crap, and so he decided to do it to prove them wrong. And well, then a demon showed up, and he had to basically rethink his entire worldview.
Yeah, and as sympathetic as I am to this, I have to interject and say that I think that there is a marked difference between belief and receptibility. Because I consider myself very receptive to these things. Guys, nothing happens to like on the whole.
Okay, good point.
Yeah, but are you trying to do it though?
I try lightly to do it. Like I went out after dark to a fairy fort and just hung out. So like,
I mean, have you drawn the circle and said the words?
So no, I haven't.
Called.
Yeah, you didn't sell your house in order to move to Ireland.
Yeah, fair enough. But at the same time, like I think that's like, for example, I think that this wiggly wobbly sort of room between receptibility and willingness to believe explains the experiences of someone like Michael Shermer, who had the grandfather's clock situation go on, and anybody who wants to look this up can look it up. But like, that's somebody who on the opposite side of me isn't receptive but might be sensitive. I am very receptive but not sensitive, I think. Well, I think this is sort of a twofold expression of how we can sort of interact with these things.
Well, Josh, you need to buy a copy of the Goetia and do exactly what it says, and I promise you'll see something. Okay?
But here's the thing. Here's the other thing. Just in saying that, like, as soon as you've read that, you have pretty much put a model down, whether you did it intentionally or not, as to what should happen. So how do we know that that you're not putting energy into sort of an unconscious model of what's happening?
Yeah, that Ren and I were picking up these old books and doing it in the first place is suggestive that we had something going on mentally about it. But yeah, I totally forgot what I was going to say.
Well, Soraya, I mean, that's sort of the idea that I've been moving to in my own research, is that these, entities that you contact through these rituals, or that, entities that people encounter out in the wild, are basically just taking elements of your conscious mind and using it to create a context for themselves. And so
creation.
Yeah, like Greg says, it's you're literally giving them energy, raw material, as it were, to manifest. And like, that's the whole point of the ritual and the circle and all that kind of stuff. It's raw material, it's clay for them to build their golem out of.
Right. The other, one of the things I wanted to mention earlier, one of the things that Kreipel said that kind of floored me was very, very simple. And I've mentioned this before. He said, strange things happen for a reason in life. And that's when he was talking about, trying to do this stuff in the lab. You're not going to get the same results as you do spontaneously in life, because it seems to be it's happening for a reason. But when we have these experiences.
I believe it does, but I still refuse to believe that you couldn't do it in a lab.
No, you might be able to do it, but not on the same level.
Because, I mean, when I read about the stuff going on with the Collins Elite that, like, Nick Redfern talks about, like, the basic idea was that the NSA and the CIA, they were doing these things in a lab, and it was working, and that's why it scared some people higher up, and it all got shut down. So I mean, like,
Rick
I feel like
Strassman was doing the tests in the lab, with DMT.
Yeah, so it's like something that I feel like you can. We've got to come up with a model that allows us to replicate it. Then the scientific model is a great way to do that. I
think we don't need the model first. Just do it, and then build the model based on the results.
Well, that's a scientific method. The scientific method is observation of a phenomenon in nature. You replicate it, and you will try to understand the reason behind of it. Humans have been creating cheese long before we understood the chemical processes behind it.
Right.
So I think it's a much more interesting conversation that's going on in ufology now. I've heard you guys talk about, let's not be so obsessed with the data and the experience reports, but what the outcome of the experience was. So another question for you, Ren, from that spirit interaction, what have you observed as being the outcome in your life?
Well, it may be a little too personal for the podcast, but I have had some major both relationship and life changes in the past 6 months.
Oh,
I mean,
jeez.
on a very basic level, I'll tell you this: the spirit that I summoned, one of his, I guess, attributes is that he provides good familiars, and within literally like a week or two of me doing that ritual and having that experience, all of a sudden, several people from basically outside of my life that I hadn't talked to in months all come back all at once and want to help me work on like the indie game project I'm working on. They want to help me learn how to do cryptocurrency trading, and I start appearing on a bunch of podcasts. So I mean, it's, I look at that and that says results.
And
Yeah.
there's some more personal stuff that you're not willing to go into. I would say for me, I was stuck deep down in this paradigm, this worldview, and I wasn't budging. I'd gotten sort of shaken up, and that's what made me pick up the old book in the first place, the grimoire.
Mm-hmm.
After this experience, that worldview has just crumbled, and I'm not sure where I'm at now. Like, I've seen seen too much stuff, man.
You've
And I
seen
think that's
glitter in the dark.
I think that's the nature of the phenomena, to break us out of these restrictive
Yes.
beliefs and bring us to an openness that is not found in dogma. These dogmatic beliefs, it's closed off, restrictive. So in my own life, I've become much more open to hearing other people's ideas, to other religions, and as a practical consequence of my magical dabblings, I mean, I'm living in a house in Mars Hill now. There was a move. I drove a Challenger. It got totaled. So I'm out of $15,000 debt now. Also, I'm a vegetarian now. I quit drinking, doing meditation, yoga. All these things are way away from where I was before I got involved in
But again, I feel like some people have minor manifestations of their occult practices in their life, and like some people have major manifestations, and you are definitely one of those people who have like very marked manifestations in their life.
Yeah. Well, and the thing I was going to say before too, when we were talking about people being more sensitive or less sensitive, I think I suspect our universe is essentially made up of information on some level.
Yeah.
And just like somebody who can be colorblind, we can be blind to other information that we interpret as psychic because we don't have a better way to define it at this point.
Yeah.
But there can be people who, can pick that stuff up easy, and there are people who can sort of pick it up, who pick it up unconsciously, and then there are people who are just blind to it. They just don't have the ability to sense it, just like some people can't see colors or some people are deaf or whatever. It's just, it's not there for them. It's not because it doesn't exist, it's because their perception mechanisms don't pick it up.
Yeah. Just as some people are tone deaf, there are some people who are God deaf.
I would say there's people gifted in different ways, but I think we can all experience some weird stuff in certain ways. Like, and a common example is dreams. I'm curious if you guys dream a lot. My dreams are crazy. Kelly doesn't remember a lot of dreams, but she has like day visions a lot. So I'm curious about if you guys have a rich dream life.
I mean,
I always have.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I've always had dreams, a lot of dreams since I was a kid, and they're always really surreal.
I've also had a lot of prophetic dreams, sometimes almost a decade before they actually came true. And I've talked before about like the sleep paralysis stuff and the lucid dreaming and things like that.
What's
my dreams have gone into overdrive in the last few days.
What's interesting too is a lot of people don't even realize that they have talents or have these abilities. Like my little brother had a prophetic dream recently, and I don't know, he doesn't even really seem to think that much of it, even though he literally dreamed of something that was going to happen and was able to confirm it and everything. And I'm blown away by it because I'm like, that's amazing, but he's just like, whatever, life goes on. Doesn't really think twice about it.
And I think, Josh, and you saying you don't experience this, but I mean, you're a guy who's written 3 books now about this stuff. So that may be just a way, You know,
Oh no, I mean, like, so my big thing is that I think that it manifests in ways that I don't exactly recognize on the face of it. So something that occurred to me in a very odd way is that my grandmother, literally as of this recording, died about 3 hours ago. My last living grandparent. But what occurred to me is that when I was 8, my first grandparent died, which was her husband. Then when I was 16, my next grandparent died, which was my father's mother. Then when I was 24, my father's father died. And now that I'm 32, my mother's mother died. So it's these 8-year intervals, and today happens to be her husband's birthday as well. So that to me has obviously some significance, but it's not as pronounced as like the sort of like large scale immediate repercussions of life that you've experienced, Aaron. But I feel like, yeah, obviously, like, I think that if you take the time to look at these sort of patterns, because I obviously, like, if I hadn't really talked to my parents, I would have noticed this sort of 8-year pattern. But some people have these things manifest more overtly in their lives, and some people less overtly in their lives. I think that perhaps I might have some sort of sensitivity, but I'm very much a slow burn kind of guy, I think is what I'm getting at.
Well, it may be just picking it up on an unconscious level. It's not presenting itself to you in an obvious way.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you've had a couple of experiences in your life.
Oh, I have. No, I've had probably a dozen experiences that I would categorize as paranormal, but not like you, Soraya. You know,
Right.
and even like I'm the sort of person that can, like, obviously, like, write off the sort of experiences that I've had at the same time.
Well, it isn't a measuring contest. I mean,
No. Oh,
that's
absolutely.
True.
It
That's
isn't,
still-
guys. It isn't. Jeez, late to the party here.
that's still like, I mean, probably 10 more experiences than most people would even admit to. So,
Everybody measuring their paranormal dicks.
whatever, Josh. I'm gonna come down to Georgia and we're gonna summon a demon. Okay.
Better. You know, you were in Alabama. You didn't come down, so
I know. Yeah. I didn't have much time there, unfortunately.
All right.
No,
Let's move on to number 28, because that's all spawned off the scientific method conversation.
like,
So number 28
yeah.
is truth serum. Of course, a very overused thing in movies. Truth serum is a supposed substance that, when administered intravenously, leads individuals to disclose accurate information that they would have withheld.
that's a 12-year-old double malt scotch.
Most so-called truth serums are actually barbiturates, such as sodium amythol or sodium pentothal. Even today, some prominent psychiatrists still refer to these substances as truth serums, and they are still frequently administered for legal purposes in certain countries, such as India. Nevertheless, there is no evidence that so-called truth serums reveal veridical information regarding past events, such as childhood sexual abuse. To the contrary, like other suggestive memory procedures, like hypnosis, they
Others.
are associated with a heightened risk of false memories and false confessions, probably because they lower the response threshold for reporting all information, accurate and inaccurate alike. Furthermore, individuals can and do readily lie under the influence of truth serum.
Just like they can under hypnosis as well.
Exactly like hypnosis.
I think that's more telling about what we consider truth than truth serum.
Well, yeah, but it's just that you're not withholding anything, and it has no bearing on whether it's real information or information that you're making up.
This is the same problem with torture as well. I mean, any of these like coercive methods, even with a person who's like under hypnosis or is under the effects of some like heavy dose of barbiturates, what they're telling you doesn't necessarily mean it is what's real. It's just whatever was real to them, or whatever they feel like they can tell you to get out of that situation, or whatever they think you want to hear. You know, it's like you can't get truth from people's memories, because people's memories are fallible.
Well, the fact that waterboarding is used is proof enough that truth serums do not exist. You know, in other words, in other case, they would have used those truth serums in order to,
Yeah.
extract information from Al Qaeda and on all those terrorist suspects.
Yeah, I mean, the
Right.
only real truth serum that ever existed was alcohol, and it usually involved some idiot army guy getting drunk at a bar and accidentally telling a German spy the attack plans for the next day.
And that's not
Yeah.
even truth serum as much as it just lowers your inhibitions and your ability to keep things secret.
Yeah,
Although
exactly.
This is where I will interject quickly that there seems to be some recent evidence, as evidenced on the as resurfaced on the Joe Rogan podcast, about the possibility of portobello mushrooms negating certain truth serums. Which I'll leave at that because I don't want to,
Oh, was
put my
that
life
the
in jeopardy.
Portobello conspiracy?
Yeah. So Gordon White posted on a follow-up to the Stamets interview that it seemed that portobello mushrooms might have a compound that can negate the sort of truth, verified CIA truth serums, which is, I have not followed up on this at all. So this is entirely it's me going off of what Gordon White said, but it seems to be that was sort of what shut down that aspect of the conversation in the Joe Rogan interview.
Yeah,
So-
I can hear the bong rips from here.
So
Yeah.
anybody involved in espionage, be sure to carry a pouch of powdered portobello.
Also, if I'm dead in a week,
That was
that's me from
extremely.
Portobello, I guess.
That was really weird how Stamets said that his life was in danger.
He shut that conversation down. It
Yeah.
stopped. It completely stopped.
And he wasn't smiling either.
No.
It doesn't mean he wasn't paranoid.
True.
Of course, just because you're paranoid.
Exactly.
Well, I to be completely honest, I feel like if you hang out in that sort of McKenna liminal sort of mushroom mycology zone, you're going to get a little bit paranoid in general. I think that's the sort of par for the course and part of the territory. But
Anybody
just-
growing mushrooms has got to have some worries.
yeah,
Buy the ticket, take the ride. It's just part of it.
Mm-hmm.
but I found that interesting. Sorry, a brief CIA mushroom digression.
I mean, isn't that what LSD was originally? At least the initial interest in LSD was for its use as a
Exactly.
truth serum.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and but that's the thing that I think that everybody found out is that anything developed in a laboratory, sort of the thing that Terence McKenna talked about was the idea that certain psychedelic compounds would have sort of an acquired history behind them, so that the newer compounds wouldn't be as populated once you went to that space as the older compounds. So I remember him talking about ketamine being you go to an office building that's empty and it's fine, it's very comfortable, but there's nobody there, versus some more sort of grandfathered in compounds like psilocybin having sort of this robust sort of history of people who have been there and sort of left their collective experiences on the other side of the veil.
That is interesting. It makes me think of alcohol being called spirits, and how much that space must be populated.
All right, number
Now that we talked about truth, I would like to also talk about lies. And talk about lie detection tests. Because that's a big part of also of the paranormal. For example, we talk about Travis Walton.
we talked
and how-
about that in the last part of this.
Did we?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, lie detector tests were one of the things we covered.
Oh my God, that was probably the other part of my multiple personality.
Well, feel free to finish what you were saying.
Well, the idea, you're right, that we talk about ways to try to tell if people are lying, and they're very unreliable,
Yeah.
because, the people get nervous and people can beat those line detection machines.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't really remember if we talked about Travis Walton
Yes, we did.
passing. Yeah, okay. So people say, aha, so that's proof that what he says is truth. Well, no, it's only true that it's
That he believes it.
believes it, exactly.
Yeah, because it doesn't tell you whether or not something was true. It just tells you not whether or not somebody believes it's true.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so number 29 is underlying biological dysfunction. In this era of the increasing biologicalization of psychology and psychiatry, authors may be tempted to assume that biological variables, such as parameters of brain functioning, underlie psychological phenomena. For example, one set of authors wrote that cognitive impairments are central to schizophrenia and may mark underlying biological dysfunction. Nevertheless, conceptualizing biological functioning is inherently more fundamental than, that is, casually prior to, psychological functioning, such as cognitive and emotional functioning, is misleading. The relationship between biological variables and other variables is virtually always bidirectional. For example, although the magnitude of the P300 event-related potential tends to be diminished among the individuals with antisocial personality disorder, compared with other individuals, this finding does not necessarily mean that the P300 deficit precedes, let alone plays a causal role in, ASPD. It is at least equally plausible that the personality dispositions associated with ASPD, such as inattention, low motivation, and poor impulse control, contribute to smaller P300 magnitudes. The same inferential limitation applies to many similar phrases, such as biological bases of behavior, brain substrates of mental disorder, and neural underpinnings of personality. So again, it kind of throws a wrench into the materialistic view of, oh, the brain does this, so the person behaves this way, and saying that it could be that the behavior is actually making the brain like this.
Mhm.
And it's
I was
another
think-
correlation does not equal causation type thing too.
Yeah.
Just because this one thing is there and another thing is there doesn't mean that they have any relation to each other at all.
Yeah. Or not any significant relation, if anything else.
So what do we think about this idea that people who, the crazy cat lady, is a result of biology, the result of people who are in close contact with cats, and cats have some parasites in them that can infect people and that can affect them, biologically in their brains, and can conduce to schizophrenia.
Yeah, well, that's a parasite, though. That's,
But that's biological.
Yeah, yeah.
But in that case, you can at least draw a causal chain of events. Like the person is infected by this parasite, and therefore these things
Okay,
happen.
so you could draw a case that there's some people who are inherently predisposed, or are more what do you say, weak, or not. I won't say the opposite of immune.
Vulnerable.
Vulnerable. Thank you. Vulnerable to these parasites. Therefore, the exposure to them could conduce to schizophrenic dysfunction.
Yeah, but again, it involves, I think, one thing happening before the other, like a causal chain of events happening. Like I think what this is trying to say is that, like, someone born with a certain condition and they also have this other psychiatric condition, they don't necessarily play into each other, or rather you can't immediately say that one has an effect on the other. It very well may be true that this thing affects the other, but that causal relationship is a little harder to determine when both of those factors are like inherent in that person, rather than them getting some sort of infection and then having psychiatric problems as a result of that infection.
Yeah, I see people who are trying to find a correlation between autism, autistic children and some immunological response in the gut, inflammation in the gut, you know. So I don't know. I mean, to me it's interesting because in the end, I mean, we are biological beings, you know. It's not like consciousness. I advocate for the idea of consciousness not being generated by the brain, but at the same time, I still think that the brain modulates consciousness.
Sure,
And if the
absolutely.
brain, you know, is affected by biology, you know, it will modulate consciousness in an aberrant way.
I think what they're doing here, with at least with this phrase, is trying to get rid of that assumption. You know,
Okay.
that, you know, we see, oh, this you know, as they said, the P300 deficiency. Oh, this happens in everyone, you know, in people with antisocial personality disorder. But it could be that the antisocial personality disorder causes the smaller levels of P300.
Okay, true. Yeah, yeah.
You know, and we don't know which came first, basically. And
Yeah.
but apparently in psychology, they tend to make that assumption that, well, it must be that the lack causes the personality disorder.
Well, also,
Yeah,
too,
they
the idea
assume that biology precedes.
Right.
Yeah, and another too, this sort of idea that somebody could have an underlying biological dysfunction gets uncomfortably close to like sort of eugenics. And I also think it's trying in some way to
Sure.
sort of warn about that as well. Like, because it's not a huge step to say, oh, well, this group of people has this underlying condition. It just makes them, you know, unable to, they're just not as human as us because they have this problem.
Mm,
And they
Right.
can't help it because they were just born with it.
yeah.
So now we're up to the section, these are shorter, called frequently misused terms. Number 30 is one we hear all the time, acting
Hour
out.
2 of our 4-hour podcast. Here we go.
This is acting out. Numerous articles use this term as a synonym for any kind of externalizing or antisocial behavior, including delinquency. In fact, the term acting out carries a specific psychoanalytic meaning that refers to the behavioral enactment of unconscious drives that are ostensibly forbidden by the superego. Hence, the term should not be used interchangeably with disruptive behavior of all kinds and attributable to all causes. So
Agreed.
basically, huh?
Agreed.
I immediately
Next.
think of the shadow, and it's always screwing people up.
Mm.
And I think this too is getting more at like not the term shouldn't be used in colloquial speech, but like the term shouldn't be used in academic papers.
Yeah,
too.
unless it's very specific about what it's talking about.
Yeah.
I'm just reading that some of the scientists that are quoting in that paragraph is Weinberger and Gomez. I'm thinking of the Addams family right now.
The next one is one, of course, we hear constantly, which is closure. And it says the term closure was introduced by Gestalt psychologists to refer to the tendency to perceive incomplete figures as wholes. This term has since been misappropriated by popular psychologists and social scientists of various stripes to describe the purported experience of emotional resolution experienced by victims of trauma following an event of symbolic importance. For example, many advocates of the closure movement contend that the execution of a murderer assists the loved ones of victims to put an end to their grieving process. Nevertheless, this use of the term closure is hopelessly vague, as it rarely is ever clear when trauma victims have achieved the desired emotional end state, nor is there research support for the proposition that many or most victims experience this end state after events of symbolic significance, such as executions or funerals.
Well, I've always personally found that the idea of like closure being sort of gauche, because if you look at like addiction, that never has closure.
Right.
Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. And similar to that, in a completely different sort of spectrum, is PTSD. Like, you're not cured of PTSD ever. Like, you might find ways to cope with it, but you sort of live with that forever. So the idea that there can be some sort of closure where, like, there's sort of a final downbeat in what you're experiencing is just it's folly.
No,
Yeah.
it's a part of you forever.
I
mean,
think,
if
yeah,
you
go
if you, if you have someone who, for instance, is missing, they go missing, you don't know what happened to them. Finding out what happened to them, even if they had died, gives you some sense of closure. It gives you, something that where you stop going, are they going to walk through the door one day? Okay, now I know they're dead. You can kind of put that down a little bit, but it doesn't stop you from grieving for them or missing them, et cetera, et cetera.
It
Mhm.
also
Yeah,
doesn't
but
get
in a
rid of the
sense,
Yeah.
it's a more manageable pain, so right? I
Yes,
guess. I
yes,
mean,
absolutely.
my mother, one of my sisters kept getting lost all the time, and there was one time when she got lost in the Azteca Stadium, and that's the biggest stadium in the whole city, in the whole country of Mexico, during a football match, and it was close to the end of the match, and my mom was, almost crazy of desperation, and she has told us, at that time, I would have hoped to know that my daughter was dead instead of missing. So I don't know.
Mhm.
This idea of by the way, Joshua, I don't know about those ideas of PTSD not being, being always not fully resolved, because there are studies by MAPS of using MDMA to cure people with severe
Well, that's true.
PTSD.
Cure is a
So
weird word for it, because I feel like without the ability to erase a memory completely, like no trauma is ever gone for good.
Yeah.
And any sort of trauma always stays with you. It could be brought up years after you felt like you're okay, because you still have those memories deep down inside.
But
No
how
matter
do you
how hard
define trauma? I mean, trauma is, there's the girl who, made fun of you when you were, in junior high because you had seats or whatever. And that you could say there's the trauma of you feeling the embarrassment and the shame and all of that. And if you can remember that and not feel that pain, is that trauma?
Well,
I-
think about how that event could possibly affect the way you look at things in subtle ways, 20 years down the line. Like, trauma doesn't necessarily have to be intense or cause you to go into a panic attack, but it could just change the way you see the world or change the way you react to certain events.
Yeah, but that's life, man.
Yeah, yeah.
It's the way we grow. It's like in the movie Star Trek. Remember that it's one of the worst Star Trek movies. Yeah, but it's that when Spock's brother is capable of removing your pain, right? Of all those traumatic experience that you go through your life, and Captain Kirk says, you don't get rid of my pain. I need my pain.
Yeah,
Right, right.
and I agree with that, because I think part of learning to deal with trauma is being able to not let it control you, like being able to recognize it and recognize its effects in your life and come to terms with it.
Yeah.
But it's never going to go away. It's just something that you have to learn how to live with.
And I think with
There's
PTSD is when you've reached that limit of what you can deal with currently, and thus you don't deal with it because you can't, at least at the time, and then it takes effort and work to kind of deal with it and work it into your system so that it's no longer an obstacle.
Yeah, that's the thing with like grief. I mean, like losing a loved one.
Yeah,
It's not something that pain that you feel because of it isn't something that can just be closed. I mean, the idea of closure, like the article's talking about, it's just that over time you're better able to deal with the fact that it happened and able to think about it more objectively. Being able to live with it.
I think a better term would be threshold. I think what it's talking about, closure movement. I mean, we came out of a culture, patriarchal culture that just suppressed everything emotional. So just swallow it, don't talk about it, don't cry. And so the closure movement kind of came out of that. Now everybody's talking about their feelings all over the place. But I think threshold, like as somebody that's been through divorce, yes, we need pain and stuff, but there's a threshold where it goes from something that's disrupting your life and is a negative impact and really screwing you up to integrating it and moving on and learning from it and it being positive. So there's that threshold point.
Yeah, and in some cases, what the article's warning about, like that whole, like you mentioned, the closure movement thing, I think the idea that at some point you can take any trauma or grief or anything you've went through and say, nope, I'm done. I'm never going to feel bad about it again. Everything's closed up, nice, tidy, and a little bow. Like it's infantile. It's infantile. I don't think that that's how people work. And when you push things to your subconscious like that, it's like what you mentioned, Aaron, it's going to build up until it hits a threshold, and it's going to come back one day, and it's going to hit you way harder than if you just learn to come to terms with it.
I can think of several people like that have held on to things. And it's really like people that are picked on. I mean, they go through life just defeated, unable to look people in the eyes. I was picked on. It's taken me a long time to get over that. But yeah, I think dealing with your pain and integrating it and making it something useful, the idea that it's over is not viable.
Okay, well, let's talk about, I'm almost hesitant about talk about this, but let's talk about death, for example, and I know Josh has just disclosed to us that someone very close to him, has just passed away, but there is the way that we handle death in Western culture that is probably not very conducive to having that abstract term of closure that maybe this paragraph is talking about.
Sex, death, and UFOs, right? The three things that you don't talk about.
Exactly. There was a time when in ancient cultures, or not too long ago, when if someone in your family died, first of all, they died in your hospital room, full of strangers. They died near people that loved them, and then when they died, those loved ones, they will tend to their body, they will wash the body, and they will get it ready to be buried under the earth. None of us has dealt with that. I've never touched a dead body in my life. I probably will never will. And
right.
And I don't remember the name of this woman who worked in a funerary home and then wrote a best-selling book that I think the title is "Smoke Gets in Your Eyes." And it talks about this idea of how in the West we have this very skewed and I guess very sick way to deal with the death of our loved ones. That maybe a more healthy way would be to do as we did in the old ways. To wash the body ourselves, to treat the body ourselves, and maybe even to bury the body ourselves. Of course, we cannot do that because that is illegal in most countries.
Right.
So that talks to you about, but I guess, it's like, for example, with when people have lost someone who died in a plane crash and you never retrieve the body. I think that in those terms, having a lack of closure is kind of valid,
Well, to bring this back to something that's very obviously very close to
sorry, man.
to me right now. No, it's fine. It's sort of a nuanced sort of situation that I'm dealing with right now. But my grandmother died simply because of there was not a person who was not related to her that was not within 10 minutes of where she died, but she died with hospital workers. Because of the way that our current world is set up. And I'm not, without casting aspersions on anybody in my family because they've been hyper vigilant. But if you look at, sort of the amount of money that was spent on this sort of like in-hospital hospice care on her, In addition to the fact that, like, if this had happened in a traditional multi-generational home, this would have unfolded a lot differently, a lot more personally. And this is, something that I think I've already mentioned, possibly, maybe I have or haven't, but I think I've already mentioned Gordon White once. And he's brought up the point that, like, it's a very privileged Western thing to think that we should not live in multi-generational homes in the West. Like, that's something that has never happened. Like, if you look back historically across all of time, it's always been multi-generational homes. And that's something that I think that it's part and parcel with the sort of compartmentalization of the nastier aspects of life, like death. I think that sort of goes hand in hand there.
But I think that multi-generational home thing is changing because of our economy.
And maybe in your countries, guys, but in Latin America is still very prevalent.
Yeah.
There's a reason why Coco, the last Pixar movie, is by now becoming the biggest selling box office movie in the whole country.
I guess
all time.
I guess I should have said a very, like, sort of like Western European, American, Canadian thing, because it's sort
that
of
kind of thing still sort of happens in the American South. I mean, like, I probably, like, the most profound experience I had with death was when I never had any grandparents. They were all dead by the time I was born. But I had a great uncle who was kind of a grandfather surrogate. And when he was dying, he was at home. He wasn't in a hospital or anything. And we knew that he was dying, so we all went out to the country to see him. And I remember when I got there, we all, like, went and saw him in his bed. Like, I went outside, and on the boat in his backyard, there was this huge crow. And I looked at the crow for a long time, and it looked at me, and then it flew off. And when I went inside, I went back to look at him, and I noticed that he wasn't breathing anymore. And I just kind of stayed in the room for a long time, just kind of watching him. And then I went and told his wife that he'd passed away and everything. And that kind of experience is something I don't think is very common nowadays. But at some places it still happens, but I don't think it's like something that the West experiences anymore.
Well, I mean, to be fair, so number one, obviously, like the psychopompic implications of what you described aside, I think that for all the crap that the American South gets, there is a tie to sort of, for lack of a better descriptor, Western European roots in terms of sort of the folk systems and the folk beliefs that I think get sort of swept under the rug. You look at, like, sort of people who analyze Southern vernacular, and they tend to say that Southern dialect tends to mirror Old English dialect more than any other sort of dialect in the Americas. So I think that perhaps that's part and parcel. Second time using that phrase, but I think that sort of goes hand in hand with that sort of tradition, because, I mean, historically, that's sort of like the part of America that Western Europeans did colonize to begin with, in terms of Spaniards and whatnot. So I think that it's sort of a natural outgrowth that you sort of have this sort of traditions of multi-generational living, as opposed to being in sort of like, the northern states. Of course, I might be talking completely out of my ass, so I'll just stop now.
I was living at home when my dad died, in the backyard, sitting on the back porch with my mom. So that was something pretty unique death up close and personal. But I just wanted to mention a book. It's called The Undertaking, and it's by Thomas Lynch, and he's an undertaker, Irish guy. And he talks about how not all that long ago in America, we had wakes and people would come for days as the body laid out in the home, and people would have that closure. So yeah, I think it's a product of materialism, and we have to go out and make something of ourselves and be independent and kind of rebellious against our roots. I think it's not been doing us a favor as a society.
No.
But I guess what I was wondering is why is the multi-generational thing more prevalent in the American South than it is in the American Northeast?
Probably just, I mean, I tend to think that the move from like multi-generational houses to individual houses was a part of sort of the post-World War II economy, and that it was a way to sell houses to encourage people that this is what you need to do, because they needed people to buy houses and buy property.
Hand in hand with white flight and stuff like that, yeah.
Yeah, but another thing too, I mean, the South has always been poorer than the rest of the country. And so it could just be a factor, well, people just either, and the South has always been more conservative, conservative in the scientific sense, or the literal sense, in that kind of old traditions and old ideas are held on to a little more strongly than they are in other places.
Yeah.
And I imagine somewhat within their psyche, they feel sort of an isolation left over from losing.
Yeah, and it could just be too, I mean, just the demographic.
Civil War.
I mean, a lot of immigrants to places like South Carolina, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, a lot of them were Irish and English. Specifically a lot of Irish, because a lot of people went to work in coal mines. Like my family apparently worked at some point in a coal mine in Tennessee. So, these people are coming from Europe, probably 1800s, and they're living in places where they're sort of isolated. They're still being exploited just as badly as they were when they were living in the old country. So I think the tendency was to hold on to that identity and hold on to those ideas, even if they've transformed over the last 200 years into, what they perceive to be an American persona. It still has deep ties to sort of, English, Welsh, Irish mythology or like practices.
From my personal observation, I think there's a lot to do with the Southern Baptist and the worldview. Kind of let go and let God. We don't my dad is a perfect example. Someone who I believe, due to his worldview, never took initiative and just kind of kept his place. And I think that was a result of religion, a large part of it.
So we got 3 more of these. Not in the whole article, but I mean, we've already
Finish the drill.
Been going what, about 2 hours and 30 minutes maybe at this point. So let's get these 3 done. I may break this into 2 parts because it's so long. I didn't realize how long we were going on this. But let's do these last 3 frequently misused terms here. Denial, obviously another obvious term. Denial, a psychodynamic defense mechanism popularized by Freud, is ostensibly unconscious refusal to acknowledge obvious facts of reality, such as the death of a loved one in an automobile accident. Nevertheless, thanks largely to the popular psychology industry, this term has been widely misappropriated to refer to the tendency of individuals with a psychological condition, such as alcohol use disorder, formerly called alcoholism, to minimize the extent of their pathology.
Yeah, and I mean, like a lot of things in this section, it's, I think, trying to make a distinction between a clinical term and sort of a popular term.
Yeah.
Like, like denial in a clinical term is like somebody literally shutting something out of their brain because it's traumatic. And and being like, unable to recall it or unable to face it because it would cause psychological damage to them. But that doesn't mean that someone with like a problem with alcohol, saying that they don't have a problem with alcohol, is denial in the clinical sense.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a form of denial, like in the popular usage of it, but there are two different things. Like denial, as it says, popularized by Freud, is very different from what most people use it for.
Well, a lot of these remind me of the figurative way that we use the term literally.
Yes.
A lot of these seem like it started out with the best of intentions, and I think we all know what you mean when you don't mean it in that sense, but it's not literally, it's not the actual definition of what it means. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's important when you're actually writing papers or doing something that is academic in nature, because you need to be clear about things.
Yeah, yeah. And it's also the phrase "I could care less." No, that's not what you mean. You mean you couldn't care less,
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Well, and getting back to our, bread and butter of paranormal, the denial is seen very oftenly among people who have suffered from what we call the alien abduction phenomenon. Probably one of the most popular examples of that is with Strieber. In the book Communion, he talks about how after he was taken by these entities from this cabin in upstate New York, he was in a very sensible state. He was very grumpy. He was having problems with his wife, and he was shouting to his kid. He went to see a doctor, and because he was suffering from discomfort in his rectum, and the doctor blatantly told him, you seems like you were you suffer from sexual abuse, and for the longest time he refused to acknowledge this reality, and so that's I think this is valid to call denial of something that happened.
Yeah, because that's his subconscious refusing to believe something had happened as a way to protect itself.
Yeah, and I think that is a clinical version of denial too. Like that sounds like a very sort of textbook clinical, like somebody shutting out, the reality of what possibly happened to them.
Yeah, so maybe missing time is not the result of the aliens, deliberately washing your brain to erase whatever they did to you. Maybe maybe it's done by your own mind.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a really good idea, RPJ.
Thanks.
Wow, I never actually thought about that, but you're actually probably, because the question's always been, well, if these, at least from the extraterrestrial standpoint, if these entities are so advanced and had ships that could, they had all this incredible science, like how come their hypnosis is so bad?
Yeah, their mind blocks and stuff.
Yeah, maybe it's not them doing it. Maybe it's just such a traumatic experience that,
or it's something that's it's something that's so hard for us to parse. It doesn't have to be, I mean, I think that the alien thing is the popular meme for it, but whatever these experiences ultimately are may be so traumatic to us that we simply block them out until we're ready to deal with them.
Well, and if you really dig down, you will find missing time experiences and alien experiences, and in fairy experiences, obviously, but also in Sasquatch experiences, you'll find that, and in ghost experiences too. Like it's not a one and done sort of thing.
In a very basic level, I mean, just fear and terror can create the experience of missing time. I mean, I can think back to some of my own experiences where it's hard to remember exactly what happened because I was so scared. It's like it creates, I mean, your mind will do these things to you. We go back to how memory is not reliable.
And like when I talked to Travis Walton, and he said the hypnosis didn't help him remember what happened to him. It helped him deal with the fear of what happened to him.
I think of so many cases of hearing people who have had a paranormal experience and they refuse to talk about it, will not acknowledge it. I mean, that could be due to the traumatic nature of it, but also the consequence of these experiences is the demolition of your worldview.
Mhm.
Probably 90% of people's worldviews can't handle these type of experiences. It will deconstruct it. And
Yeah.
so rather than have it,
Right.
everything they know pulled out from beneath their feet, they just are not going to deal with it.
But what about the blue avians, Aaron?
I never got into that.
I mean, like, this is all fine and good, but like, what about the blue avians from the star systems?
You know, that brings up the whole denial thing, or disclosure thing. You know, what if the idea that disclosure isn't because, I mean, okay, so people are like, oh, well, the government's just trying to hide the fact that they're aliens. And people will be able to handle the fact there's aliens. There's all kinds of TV shows about aliens and all that kind of
Right.
stuff. What if the reason the government is quote unquote hiding things, if they know anything at all, is because the actual truth is so weird or horrifying or bad that it really would cause people's worldview to crumble.
Or expectations of disclosure are actually a mental disorder.
Yeah, that's
Denial.
It's like Stockholm
syndrome,
large,
yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right, the next one. Oh, this
Sorry.
I'm sure this one's going to go well. The next one is fetish. A fetish, formerly referred to as fetishistic disorder in the current version of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual on Mental Disorders, is a psychiatric condition marked by persistent, intense, and psychologically impairing sexual arousal derived from inanimate objects like shoes or non-genital body parts like legs. This term is technically a paraphilia, which should not be used to refer to generic preferences for specific objects, ideas, or people. One writer, for example, described the national fascination of the Japanese with smartphones as a feature phone fetish.
Yeah, but that gets into the, I don't know, it's splitting hairs. It kind of gets into the idea that, you know, how is language used?
Yes.
Because people just pick up that term and use it. I mean, I can understand what they're saying, that, you know, it's an actual disorder that actually impairs certain people's ability to exist in, you know, society.
Right.
But I mean, what other word are you going to use for it? I mean, you know, are you going to say that there's a Japanese paraphilic, like, you know, phone feature problem or something? I mean,
correct me if I'm wrong, guys, especially you, Aaron, but I think that the origin of the word fetish is in magic.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That fetish is something that is used as some kind of like a proxy of a thing, you know, almost like a, I don't want to, well, maybe an example of that would be a voodoo doll.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think of a little goddess or god idol, or I don't think of arousal immediately when I hear the words.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, the idea, I think, in the clinical term is that you're equating an emotion or a sensation with an image of something that has no direct connection to whatever you're feeling,
and becoming obsessed with it. Not just,
Mhm.
It's not just, I think shoes are sexy. It's, oh my God, shoes. I can't be around someone wearing shoes, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I think, like, the idea, like a fetish of a god or something. The idea is that you feel adoration towards this god, but you're directing it towards this object that is not the god. It's just a piece of clay or metal or whatever it is.
I just Googled it really quick. It says used by peoples of West Africa as an amulet or charm, from French, Portuguese, charm, sorcery, or originally an adjective meaning made by art.
So it's a colonial term, so we got to stop using it too completely. Nobody can say that.
So the idea is that the fetish has power over you, like it once had power over sort of certain supernatural realms, I guess.
Yeah.
Your fetish has power over you. Yeah,
that makes sense. Well, the last one is something that we see a lot in politics.
Wait, we're over the fetish? Okay.
Yeah,
That's fine.
Are you sure? Are you okay? Are you right?
Yeah. Where did the fetish go? It's fine.
Splitting similarly refers to a psychodynamic defense mechanism, ostensibly Why do they have to write like this? Ostensibly ubiquitous in BPD, which I'm assuming is bipolar disorder, that forces individuals to see people as all good or all bad rather than in shades of gray, warts and all.
How about where to go
by engaging in splitting, people with bipolar disorder and similar conditions are hypothesized to avoid the anxiety of perceiving those they love as hopelessly flawed creatures that they are. I'm assuming that's bipolar disorder. I mean, BPD. It doesn't actually. Nevertheless, this term is consistently misused to refer to the propensity of people with bipolar disorder to pit staff members on a psychiatric unit or other caregivers against one another. This disruptive behavior, sometimes termed staff splitting, should not be confused with the formal meaning of splitting. But that's interesting because I feel like that's a societal thing at this point. You know, if you're a member of one political party, everyone in the other political party is bad. You know, it's not, oh, they have some good points and bad points. They're evil. They're the enemy. They're, you know, and it's something you see more and more with society in general, but I think politics, it's the most visible.
Yeah, but if you take that too far, you run the risk of engaging people in good faith who have no good faith towards you. Like the thing that has frustrated me the most lately is the idea that a lot of liberals put forth that, oh well, you know, we should convert Nazis by just like talking to them, or, you know, like the idea that you could somehow come to a compromise about things like genocide. It's
Right.
like, no, in some cases people are just bad. And
I don't think it's the people. I think it's the ideas. If you can destroy the idea of the person, fine.
Yeah, and it, you know, I mean, and anyone is made up of their experiences, their surroundings, their upbringing, so on and so forth. So understanding how these people have been brought up to be like this would help us hope, you know, and have any chance of like changing the way they see the world.
Yeah, and
I
think that people should try to empathize with people and try to see what brought them to where they are. But again, sometimes I think if you take that to an extreme, you run the risk of basically being manipulated by people who aren't acting in good faith to begin with. This is something Sartre said about Nazis, especially in Germany. A lot of people thought that they could just argue with them and somehow they would, you know, defeat them using their own logic or something. And you see that a lot today with especially like popular commentators and talk show hosts and things like that, thinking that they can just, you know, own someone with logic. And it's like, that doesn't work, you know, like no one's ever just been changed by that.
That's what the phenomena is for, to deconstruct belief and opinions and break all that down, all that's restrictive and separating us. I think that's what the paranormal, this phenomena, all this stuff that goes, that's like its purpose is to, I go back to Reagan's, do you remember in the 1980s, Ronald Reagan's comment about if we were to, I forget the exact thing, but in other words, if aliens were to show up, we'd all get along a lot better really quick.
Yeah, if there was an extraterrestrial threat, yeah.
But in that case too, especially in the paranormal experiences, that involves something happening to that person that causes them to re-examine themselves. And I guess what I'm getting at is that just like argue with people or talking to people or trying to convince people some way or the other, that's never going to do something. It's going to require them to have some sort of experience that causes them to self-reflect in such a way that their worldview changes. So I don't know.
Or have experiences that are not within their worldview. That's the thing.
So we need to give all the Nazis mushrooms. That is.
I think it's more than just Nazis that need it at this point.
Yeah.
I think of the guys who into oration and logic and Zeno's paradoxes. I think that's why he introduced them, is to say, hey, logic isn't all you guys think it's cracked up to be. Here's some holes that can be poked into it. And the introduction of paradox, I mean, that's the phenomena is paradox itself. So I've always had a thing for paradox and writers who use a lot of it, like G.K. Chesterton, Don Quixote, Cervantes, who wrote Don Quixote. I just think paradox is such a good tool for breaking down belief, which is exactly what restricts us.
Yes. Yeah. But that either or mentality is something that the mainstream media definitely pushes, because
God.
it's something you can control. It's something you can market. And any form of major patriotism is the same way. It's something that's marketable. It's something used to control people. Even when it breaks down to things like sports teams where it's fairly harmless, it's still that marketing thing. It's all about making money off people who are going to, show their support for their team by buying merchandise.
On the other hand, too, like you got an obsession with compromise. I mean, this is, if we're going to get into politics, this is one of the reasons the Democratic Party has been losing so badly for so many years, is this unrelenting Aaron Sorkin-esque idea that people just have to compromise and just talk it out and we can all just meet in the middle, when you can't do that when the other side constantly pulls the football back from you when you go to kick it. Because like they'll say they'll compromise and then they just don't. So it's like, why even bother with the compromise in the first place if the other party isn't even acting in good faith?
Well, I think too that the problem is that we have political parties.
Yeah.
There are good sides. There are good people on both sides. There are good ideas on both sides. And instead of going, hey, this is a good idea and this is a good idea, let's use them together. It's like, no, we can only use the ideas on the right side, or we can only use the ideas coming from the left side. It's like, this is supposed to be to better our society, not a competition to see who's in control of it.
Well, that's why I wish we had a parliamentary system in the U.S., but what can you do?
I was looking at, I think it's like 59% of eligible voters voted in the last election. All my hope for the future is in those that did not show up. That we're done with this.
I just wish this country was like Australia or something, where it was mandatory to vote.
But the Australians hate that.
I don't care. It's just, it's something that it should be like a civic duty. If you live in that country, you got to vote.
Yeah.
And it's like,
see, but I think you should have a right not to vote. That in a way that says something.
It's kind of like, Soraya, I think you hit on why I never cared for sports. It's just like, I'm not playing the game. I'm not. This doesn't interest.
There's nothing wrong with sports. Sports are supposed to be fun, but it's gotten, the merchandising is such that it pits people against each other. You have to like the same teams or you're the enemy, and it's like, what? This is just stupid.
The thing about not voting in the U.S., especially, one of the reasons I vote is that I know that there are people who are going to be voting that actively want to do things that will harm me. So it's it's more of a self-defense kind of thing than it is a responsibility or a feeling of civic duty. It's just I know that there's some guy who wants to take away my health care, who wants to
exactly.
give me more taxes or whatever. So it's I feel like it's my duty just in terms of self-defense and defense of people that I love.
I think no matter who's in office is going to be against myself as an individual, my community. Everybody knows America is capitalistic. They're into what's the word I'm looking for? It's all about business. So
yeah,
it's not, nobody's represented except companies.
In the end,
yeah.
People
That's
being
the problem with
represented
both
in
Democrats
politics.
and Republicans in this country. Both parties are both the parties of business. There's no real voice of the left. That's why I'm in the Democratic Socialists of America. Whoop whoop. But it's not like they're a strong force, really. It's, I think, not even 100,000 people. What are they? But yeah, you're right. We live in a country where both parties, either choice we have is a choice that's actively going to be working against us, one more explicitly and one more subtly. So it's you don't want to do either one, and then a third party choice isn't viable, so you get discouraged.
I will say that
it would be viable if people didn't think it wasn't viable. That's the only thing. If enough people realized, hey, there's enough of us to vote for not a Republican or a Democrat to let someone else win, then they would win.
Yeah.
I will say I'm interested in politics on a local level, like where you can see stuff being done in your own community and
Sure.
stuff like that.
And looking at this definition of splitting, they're talking about.
What is that?
I think Josh passed out.
Yeah.
Josh,
Turn
you
into
there?
a pumpkin.
Okay, what's cool about the system we're using now is I can mute Josh.
I was going to say politics did it.
So the interesting thing about this splitting definition, though, is it's almost like we live in a bipolar society, and the people that run it are splitting us and turning us against each other. This whole staff splitting stuff is like society splitting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean that's the big problem I've had with the Democratic strategy in the past, in the months since the election. Really, the idea that they're not going to offer us anything, any strong alternatives. They're not going to put forth a strong message like Medicare for all or anything. Their whole strategy is just to say, "Hey, we're not the other guys." And it's like, I'm sorry, guys, that's not a strong argument. That's not
good enough. Yeah.
It's not good enough anymore. It really isn't. You've got to come up with some idea that says, hey, we're going to be doing something for you to affect your material conditions. That's why they keep losing. It's because they're not offering things that will actually help people. They're just saying, hey, vote for us because we're not them. And that tribalism, people just aren't buying that anymore.
It seems to go back and forth, because no one's ever happy with our political system because we're still putting in there generally psychopaths who are protecting millionaires and companies.
Exactly.
And so it's like, okay, these guys suck. Let's vote them out and vote in the other guys who then essentially do the same thing. They have a different mask on, but they're basically doing this. And then we say, well, let's vote them out, put the other guys back in. And it's like,
if Alex Jones system. If Alex Jones taught us one thing, it's that they all party together once a year at Bohemian Grove.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They do spirit cooking together.
Yeah.
But like the thing is too, I mean, anytime there are options that are not on either side, right? Either party will do everything they can to try to eliminate that option as a possibility. I mean, with the recent like DNC papers and stuff that came out, like the information from Dawn in Brazil, you see that people who were on the Democratic ticket, who were kind of left of the center, which they were trying to push, they basically didn't give them any funding. They didn't support them at all, and they lost. I mean, one positive thing is in this last kind of local election cycle that happened last month or earlier in the month, a lot of people who weren't on either side got voted in. A lot of DSA members got voted in local elections, like in Virginia and I think in like what's that one city that Michael's in?
Baltimore,
yeah. Places like that, you saw a lot of people get into office who weren't a Democrat or a Republican, and that, I don't know, it gives me some hope.
Yeah, it's a good sign if nothing else.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to stop there. That was up to number 34 of 50. And so we'll come back and we'll do at least one more, maybe two more parts, because there's some other really interesting terms that they bring up. And I'm sure we can, like reductionism is in here. There's a whole section on oxymorons. Which deals with personality traits and things like that. So, I mean, there's some other stuff in here that is, mental telepathy is one of them.
Yeah, I just saw the mental telepathy. It's so pedantic too. It's like telepathy is obviously mental. So you don't just non-mental forms of telepathy.
So we'll get to that probably next time. Because this one's been so long that we put Josh to sleep. He's going to wake up in a while and be like, what's happening?
Are you done talking about politics yet?
But we weren't talking about politics in the traditional way. It wasn't like, I'm right, you're wrong. It's more of an observational way.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, it sounds like Josh has had a long day.
Yes.
He probably needs to sleep.
All right. So I thank you guys very much. Let's go down. Aaron, you can be found at
Charm the Water and goatsaway.com.
Okay. Red Pill?
Mexico. dailygrail.com, Mysterious Universe, absorbedbydesign.com.
Ren?
I write a blog at liminalroom.com,
Okay.
and I mostly post stuff on Twitter, and I'm at Mr. _Apol. So Mr. spelled out MISTER _ APOL.
All right. And let's see if Josh is still asleep. Josh?
Yes.
Josh is asleep. You can find Josh at joshuacutchin.com. All right. Thank you guys very much.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.